Got a couple of minutes here. Oh, you gonna sit up here?
You want to sit up here with me? Let me move my stuff out of your way.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. You don't have shoes, you need some for Christmas.
Get shoes for Christmas.
Yeah, we'll just sing one song, get them right into class. Hey, I'll get a picture of y'all sitting with Ruby. Smile, Lucille. There you go. That's a good picture.
You want to sing?
All right, we've got David and Alice, have Jerry.
Are you ready to sing again?
Stuart, Mark, Andrew, Sherry, Patrick, and Caden. A lot of Crabtrees with us here, listen. Did you get everybody there, Ruby? We'll just have one song and get the class here, but we've got about 20 seconds. I'm glad y'all made it back to class, because huh?
Be lonely by myself.
Yeah, you'd be lonely teaching. All right, it is 12 o'clock. It's good to have everyone here. And quite a few that didn't make it back. Just a reminder, don't forget our services at 6 p.m. this evening as well. I'll tell you, I just happened to open in 992. We got two young ones near the front here. This is sort of a children's song. 992, we'll sing one song, then we'll have class. Can you count the stars? Can you count the stars of evening that are shining in the sky? Can you count the clouds that daily over all the world go by? God the Lord, who doth not slumber, keepeth all the boundless number, but he careth more for thee, but he careth more for thee. Can you count the birds that warble in the sunshine all the day? Can you count the little fishes that in sparkling waters play? God the Lord their number knoweth, for each one his airy showeth. Shall he not remember thee? Shall he not remember thee? Can you count the many children in their little beds at night, who without a thought of sorrow rise again at morning light? God the Lord who dwells in heaven, loving care each has given. He has not forgotten thee. He has not forgotten thee. Okay, let's have our classes. She's still singing the song. All right. Turn, if you will, to Hebrews, or have our Bible class 12:15. We'll finish Hebrews here. 12 today, we'll finish. Let me reset this. Good to have each one back. Of course, a lot have gone. I know a lot have probably had some family meals today. A lot like that going on. Hebrews 12:15. Last week we closed out with verse 14. It just talked about the Lord chastising us. That lets things happen to us to try to bring us back around whenever we become unfaithful. And this is for children of God. He chastens those that He loves. He talks about, for whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and scourges every son whom He receiveth. Doesn't say how He does it, but things happen. If we become unfaithful, He could bring sickness upon us, financial problems, other problems in life. We make the way difficult for ourselves whenever we sin. And that's what he's talking about in this chapter, to endure it and help each other, wherefore lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees. Make straight paths for your feet, going over a little bit of last week. Don't make things more difficult than they have to be for yourself. Make straight paths for your feet. Lest that which is lame turn out of the way, but let it rather be healed. So make a place easy for to walk, so that which is lame may not be dislocated, but rather healed. We do stumble and fall. It's really a metaphor about being lame, but make a straight path for yourself to make life easier. And that's basically where we closed. We closed with this verse last week, talking about through this life that we walk, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. And that's where we closed last week. I didn't do the whole chapter. I'm splitting these up a little bit more because I don't want to rush them, since we're not passing out the Bible lessons. But follow peace with all men, so be peaceful, be holy. Without these you cannot see the Lord. And this is our regular Bible class, so if you have any comments, feel free. All right, picking up verse 15. There is 29, so we'll move right along. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Let's talk about our walk through this life, pursuing peace, looking carefully, paying attention, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. I hear a lot of people say we're saved by grace, and we are, but he says you can fall short of that grace and not be, receive it. Lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled. I think he's talking about problems and bitterness between people, because the context here is be at peace with all men and holy, lest you fall short of the grace of God, and any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. And so he talks about a root of bitterness. Don't let it even take root before it even starts. You need to take care of it. And he talks about how that we can lose our salvation for things that aren't important at all. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the best way to get at any kind of, say, plant you don't want is before it even takes root. And that's what he's talking about here. Take care of anything before it springs up, and thereby many be defiled. And I think this is the kind of things that can spring up. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person. Fornicator, we know what that means. Profane here, looking up the Greek word, godless, worldly, irreligious, is just doing things openly sinful. And you see so much of that, I know, online. But lest there be any fornicator or profane person, as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. Now you remember he had a birthright that he was the firstborn and should have inherited. But he sold it for what? Basically, a bowl of food, a pot of porridge. Be like a bowl of oats or something, porridge. His birthright. Can you imagine selling and giving away your property, your inheritance, for one meal? I'm sure the meal you just had, Sandy, from McDonald's was good, but would you trade your home and your property for it? Well, that's ridiculous to even think about, but that's what Esau did. He was so hungry, he was fainting, and it calls it here red porridge, pottage. So Jacob sod pottage, Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, of that same red pottage, for I'm faint. And he said, sell me this day thy birthright. I'll give you this bowl of food, but I want your birthright. I want to be first in line. And Esau said, I'm at the point to die, what profit is it? So he sold him his birthright for one bowl of food, which is ridiculous to think about. But how many people are selling their eternal inheritance in heaven by, say, one adulterous relationship, and they stay in it, they never repent, or just any small thing that doesn't mean anything in the long run? Nothing means anything except your eternal life. And so the way that Esau sold his inheritance for one bowl of food, there are people that are selling their eternal life to stay with the wrong mate or to live in sin. They're selling it for nothing. They're not getting anything for it. His firstborn right was certainly not worth, the bowl of food wasn't worth that by any means.
It goes along with the verse, and I don't remember which one of the Gospels, that asked the question, what would you give in exchange for your soul?
Right. Jesus said, what do you give in exchange for your soul? Larry has mentioned when Jesus asked that. There's nothing. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world or lose his own soul? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? And he asks again in Mark. I assume that's what you was talking about, Larry. There's nothing worthwhile. If you gained the whole world, you owned everything in this world, and lose your soul, there's no profit. But people are selling their souls for a bowl of porridge. Well, my wife doesn't believe this way, so I'm going to attend with her. Or I care more for this woman than my wife, so I'm leaving my wife to go be with her. That's why he mentions fornication here. People are selling their souls for a few days of pleasure at best. But he, for one morsel of meat, sold his birthright. That is ridiculous to think about. For one meal, you sold everything you had. And he would have gotten over hungry in a few minutes. But he lost his birthright forever. For you know that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no place of repentance. And he found no place for a change of mind in his father, though he sought it carefully with tears. It does talk about him crying over this. And his father would not change his mind. He'd already done it. And the Lord's not going to change his mind about us. If we give up our eternal salvation for something that's nothing, and even the whole world is nothing compared to that, there is no changing of mind. So we don't want to lose it. For you're not coming to the mount that might be touched, and that burn with fire, nor into blackness and darkness and tempest. It says, for you have not come to the mountain that may be touched, that burn with fire, into the blackness and darkness and tempest. I think that was where God dwelt. He said, you hadn't come to this point yet, I think, of facing the Lord. And the sound of a trumpet, and of course there will be a trumpet at the end, and the voice of words, which voice they heard and treated the word should not be spoken to them anymore. They heard the voice of God, and it was so loud and thunderous, they said, let us not hear it again, lest we die. And the Lord said, they've spoken well, they will die. And I think he's just using an example. You haven't come to that point yet of actually facing God, of hearing him, and all these things, and the sound of a trumpet. Of course, there will be a trumpet at the end. And the voice of words, which they that heard and treated the word should not be spoken to them anymore. You haven't got to this point yet of actually facing God. So you've got time to repent, I think is what's being said here. For they that could not endure that which was commanded, and if so much as a beast touch the mountain, it should be stoned or thrust through with the dart. Let me go ahead and read the next verse. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake. So they had come to God at the mountain. I wanted to see that in the Old Testament. And they said to Moses, speak thou with us. Talk about the voice of God here. They had come to the mountain. And all the people saw that this is Exodus 20:18. This is when he was given the Ten Commandments. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. And the Lord said that basically, you can go on, that if they do hear this people had spoken correctly. And so they were so afraid of the voice of God. It was like, there's so many things like at the end of time here, because in Revelation 4, when we see God sitting on his throne, there's thunderings and lightnings. When Jesus returns, there'll be the sound of a trumpet. And I think there's examples here. You haven't come to this point yet. So you've got time to repent. Don't sell your birthright for nothing. But you are coming to Mount Zion. You haven't come to the end yet. You've come into Mount Zion, which would represent the church, and into the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels. You've come to something different. You're in the church. He talks about that. To the general assembly and church of the firstborn, referring to Christ, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. This is what you've come to. You're in this group of saved people. You're not at the end, but the end is coming. I know this can be a little deep, but this is some meat of the word. No wonder the Hebrews writer wrote about the meat of the word. But you haven't come to that, where you're at the spiritual mountain and the voice of God, the thunderings and lightnings. You're in the church. And I think the whole context, there's still hope to be saved. Well, we learned some things here. The church is called the General Assembly and Church of the Firstborn, which are written in heaven. And we are those who are saved. The names are in the book of life. And to God, the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect. That's the group that we're in. And to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, as opposed to the old, and to the sprinkling of blood that speaketh better things than that of Abel. We're referring to the Old Testament here, when Abel, of course, offered a sacrifice. But you've come to something far better and still can be saved. Let's read a little bit more and we'll comment. See that you refuse not him that speaketh. So the whole context of what we're studying today, that Esau sold his birthright for one bit of food. And then he talks about the people coming to the mountain. They were afraid. They were facing God. And he's warning, don't sell your soul. You haven't come to that point of facing God yet. You're in the church with people whose names are written in heaven. So don't refuse him that speaketh. Make sure you listen to these warnings. For if they escaped not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. Moses spoke to them. If they didn't listen, they could not escape. There was punishment. And he says, how much more do you think it's going to be if you refuse to listen to him that speaks from heaven? And so we have an even more voice. He talks about, for if they escape not him who refused him that spake on earth. Of course, the Lord came and spoke to them. Maybe referring to the Lord here, but he spoke through Moses. And so how much more is our escape not possible if we don't listen to the one who speaks from heaven? You know, the world has no hope. We do, because we're in this church, the General Assembly, the church of the firstborn. Talking about the Lord when he spoke, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he that hath promised, saying, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. They were so afraid of the voice of God, they said, lest we die, as you see here. I'm trying to think. The Lord said to speak, people speak right, correctly here. But now the voice that speaks shakes heaven and earth both. Here's where he said the bounds around the mountain. They couldn't even come to the mountain. Whoever touches it should die, any animal or anything. And they heard the voice. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him by a voice. And he told them not to break through and touch the mountain. Very interesting how that they were approaching the Lord here. They couldn't go down and gaze upon the Lord or at the mountain here. But now not only did the Lord's voice shaking the earth, but it's shaking heaven. This is obviously a metaphor, but the power of the voice of God, his commandments that we need to listen to. They were afraid to hear God speaking out of the mountain. We need to be afraid to hear him speak out of heaven because it needs to be much more obeyed. Are there any questions or comments? We've only got a few more verses. Some of this is pretty deep, I know. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Let me read it in the New King James. Now this, yet once more, indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken, as of things that are made, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Basically, that our existence on earth here is going to end. They will be removed and shaken. The things which cannot be shaken are remaining. So we need to obey the Lord because our time here is short. Just two more verses. Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. So that's how we serve God. And I'll read one more verse. For our God is a consuming fire. The whole context here, and they had a fire on the mount as well. The fire and on the mount, Sinai was on smoke altogether. It quaked greatly. The voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder. And this is where I'd read a while ago. And they asked, let us not hear the voice of God. Let not God speak with us lest we die. And that's when he's telling them not to make other gods. He was very serious about this. It shook. It was loud. They were so afraid. And at one point the Lord said that people speak right. I think is the way it was. That they would die. That was not right there, but the people spoken correctly. And all those things that happened, they were the great fear. He says we need to even be more fearful. He's not just shaking the earth, but he's shaking heaven. And people don't even care today. But let's look at just a little bit more at this last of this. Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved. So those who are in the Lord, you receive a kingdom which cannot be moved. Let us have grace. You know, in accepting this, grace on our ends too, and it's a gift. Grace means like, the Greek word's charisma. But let us have grace, you know, that he's granting us this, whereby we may serve God acceptably. You know, the Greek word for grace is charisma, charis. And so you need to have charisma, and I think a humbleness about you in accepting this, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. And of course, reverence here, the word reverence, I want to look that up for you. To revere something, serve God with reverence, a sense of shame or honor, modesty, bashfulness, reverence, regard for others, respect. That's why, eidos, that's why that we don't, you know, preachers of the church don't call themselves reverend. A lot do, but the word reverend itself is only used in the Bible once. It's used in Psalms. Holy and reverend is his name. And so, it's the Lord's name. I have no right to carry that. But serve him with reverence and godly fear. It's a fear of respect, like of things that you know you respect. You don't stick a fork into an electrical outlet because of your respect for electricity. That kind of fear. We're always being careful. That's why people during COVID wore masks, respecting what that it could do. There's a kind of fear that, you respect the dangers that can come. So this is a godly fear. It's just like, especially you can relate to it when you're in school, a principal sticks his head out. I want to see you in my office right now. That would provoke some fear, even if it was something good. And it's that kind of reverence. And the last verse, for our God is a consuming fire. That's why we need to serve God with fear and reverence, because at the end, all will be destroyed with fire. I look at these big things and cities and all the things being built. You think even Glasgow. We're on our third Walmart. And what was wrong with number one? Number two, I guess they just kept outgrowing. But people build buildings, they replace them, and it just keeps going. Cities, skyscrapers are being built. It's constant, non-ending, but all of it's going to be destroyed at the end. So for that, and certainly in many ways, figuratively speaking, our God is a consuming fire. We are fearful and respectful of fire. Fire is helpful, it warms, it cooks food, it gives light, but it also consumes and is deadly. I know I told you in Arkansas, one of the elders out there that was elder whenever I first preached in Arkansas out there, he and his wife and their grandson were killed by a house fire just a few months ago. I don't think Ruby's dad ever knew that. They didn't really want to tell him, understandably, because they had always been friends and everything, and I'm sure he never found out. But they had parked a wagon of hay next to the house. Hay can combust, in hot weather, and it did. It killed the man and his wife. Their grandson went in to rescue them, and he died in the fire as well. And a fire can be very consuming and deadly. And so that's why we respect the Lord. Okay, it's almost 25 after. It's about time I try to knock. Are there any questions or comments? Adam.
Nothing about what you're saying about Walmart. I was trying to check. Were you saying they're going to build a new Walmart building now? Or?
No. They have built 3. They're on number 3.
Okay, because when was the first one? Because I remember the second one really well, and obviously the third one, but I'm thinking, did they move around the time I was born, or was that?
Probably. Let's say who did the ribbon cutting. When did Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah.
Not quite. It was I'll say this, the old Walmart was there before Ruby and I married. We married in 85, or 86, so it was there in the mid-80s.
The old one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I know the one I remember, the second one is where the TJ Pavilion is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to imply that they were building new.
I thought somehow, I was like.
And they probably will, done.
That wouldn't surprise me, but I was about to say another good point. Even if it doesn't end with the end of the universe, even if it doesn't last until then, it'll certainly probably just crumble over time.
Well, it will. They'll replace it or do something. And so all that, everything you see is going nothing, all these big things that cities built. But yeah, you wouldn't have remembered that first Walmart. It was in the 80s.
Okay.
What year were you born?
91.
Yeah.
Late 91. Yeah, November.
Jerry said the second one, that's TJ Pavilion, was 1990 to 2005.
So I would not remember the original one.
No. It was a good one. I liked it. It had such a neat little restaurant in there.
Was it about the same size?
No, it was small.
Oh,
It was before they did super centers. It's just basic.
Yeah, because I remember the second one. I mean, it wasn't super center, but it was big, about like Kmart Rural King was. Yeah, because I went to Rural King yesterday, and the layout's still really similar to how it was in Kmart, just more open.
Yeah, I know you don't remember these, but in Glasgow, they had a Big K before they had Walmart there. Do you remember Big K?
I always thought that was that like a different company than Walmart, Kmart, or it was a different company than Kmart? I always thought they were the same.
Yeah, there was a Grants there. So. Yeah, I think Big K is different.
There's still a few Kmart's in the U.S., I believe.
And so, yeah, a lot of it is just things change constantly. You think as much as those buildings cost, they just basically throw them away. Sometimes they just have abandoned.
That's the reason they do it, because they're only built to last about 20 years.
Larry said they're only built to last about 20
And
years.
so every 20 years, comes to the point that it takes more to repair them than it does to keep it going.
No, that makes
At
sense.
least one was
Well,
4 years.
There's a lot of things and places, it's funny, there's a lot of things and places that are only built to last a short time and end up lasting longer than the stuff that they were supposed to last a long time too. Am I right?
I would say so.
Things like that, I believe.
Well, yeah, the first Walmart that was built in Glasgow is still in operation. It's not Walmart, but it's still in operation.
Yeah.
They're only built, it takes more to maintain them after 20 years
Yeah.
than it does to build a new.
I don't even remember the second one.
You don't? Okay.
I don't know if maybe mom and dad just didn't shop there often or what, but all I remember is the one that's there now.
It was the normal size Walmart, which I'm not even sure if they have any normal size. Like, I'm not even sure if they have non-supersized Walmarts in the rest of
I would say no.
Turn, if you will, to number 549. We're going to begin our second half. And we'll look at Zechariah 12. We'll sing a song to denote in between the two. If there's any announcements about any sickness or anything. Yeah, Jerry said Walmart, I didn't see this text, they left their first location in 1990. He teaches history too. Number 549. We got some visitors up front with Ruby. All right, we'll sing this and we'll have a lesson on Zechariah 12. There is sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright than glows in any earthly sky. For Jesus is my light. No, there's sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. There is music in my soul today, a carol to my King. And Jesus listening can hear the song I cannot sing. Oh, there's sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. There is gladness in my soul today, and hope and praise and love for blessings which he gives me now, for joys laid up above. Oh, there's sunshine, blessed sunshine, while the peaceful, happy moments roll. When Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. Okay, turn if you will to Zechariah 12. We'll look at this. It's not too long of a chapter, 14 verses. Ruby dropped her book, and Lucille said, Ruby, you okay? And so they're sitting with Ruby. So it's amazing. I don't want to get off here, but the study of how children learn languages, it's really is interesting. And they just pick it up and go with it. It's not always proper grammar, but then it begins to develop. It really is fascinating. All right, Zechariah 12. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord. So the burden here just means this, like he's pronouncing judgment upon them. I was looking up the Greek word, it's not even there, but in that particular lexicon. But the word burden here means a load he's given, something they're going to have to load. It can be prophecy, but something he is laying upon them. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord. I like what it says about the Lord here and what we learn. Which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundations of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Of course, a lot of people do not believe in the Lord creating the universe. There has to be a beginning. Even those who are staunch atheists believe that something came from nothing, and the Bible teaches us that. And the inevitable question would be, well, where did the Lord come from? He just existed. And some things you just have to accept by faith. The Lord wants us to. I'm sure it will be explained in ways we can understand after this life. But we're told the Lord stretcheth forth the heavens. He layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. So he created all we see, where we live, in our very being. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. Now, reading this earlier, Jerusalem had already been taken captive years ago, and they were already back. Zechariah is near the end of the Old Testament after they've been carried. So this is probably a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, and also just probably a metaphor of that, people, the punishment brought upon people. But I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. You can look that up in world history here, just Jerusalem in AD 70. And of what happened, the siege of Jerusalem. And they were taking, here's an interesting drawing of it. And this drawing was actually, this artwork's 1867. They know pretty much the dates. They got the exact date. This is interesting because this historical account says the siege of Jerusalem took place between April and September, about the year 70. And it was in the year 70. We know that from worldly history. But it's interesting. The Lord had told the people to pray for something. Pray that your flight be not when? In the winter. And according to world history, it did occur between April and September. So people apparently took that to heart and prayed for that. But it was in AD 70, 3 days before the Passover. The Roman army started besieging it, and they basically cut them off. And, of course, Titus was the Roman emperor then. Yeah, right there, I couldn't see it. Led by future Emperor Titus. But I think that probably some of this talk here is of this. I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. So the punishments that will be brought upon them later, even after the time of Christ, they're going to be a cup of trembling. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut into pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. It says, what will happen in that day, I'll make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all people. It's going to be a burden to be in Jerusalem. Even Jesus said, pray that it not be in the winter, and woe to those who give suck in those days, and pray it not be on the Sabbath. I'm going to make it a heavy stone. Any who will heave it away will surely be cut into pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. They won't be able to remove this burden upon them. It'll be like a stone that cuts you. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness, and I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. They won't have anywhere to go or anywhere to turn. You saw that drawing there, that people were literally just falling over the walls and trying to get out. They were cut off till they really, starvation is what they had just cut them off and, made them starve. And I do think he is referring to that day that's coming, because Jesus talked about it. And whenever he said that this day would come, And many of you, will not pass till this day comes. Then he says, but of that day and hour, he switches talking about the end of time, knoweth no man, not only the Father, not the Son, nor the angels. But the destruction brought upon Jerusalem for sins, of course. And the governors of Judah will say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in the Lord of God, in the Lord of hosts their God. People in the outlying areas of Judah, and I think we get into even more metaphor now, probably the end of time, we could compare it to, that the governors round about will say, I'll go to Jerusalem and let them be my strength. But there won't be anywhere that they can go because they're being captive. It's just like, if our nation was being attacked and there's nowhere to turn to, to the government or whatever. If we were under a great siege here in Munfordville, something happened, that the county seat had been bombed, there's no use coming to the county officials to protect you because they're not even going to be available. And that's what's being said here. That's what's going to happen to people of the world. There's no use turning to false teachers, other religions, and the such like in the day of the Lord, because they're not going to be your strength. In that day will I make the governors of Judah like an hearth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheath. They're just going to burn up. And they shall devour all people round about, on the right hand and on the left. And Judah and Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in their own place, even in Jerusalem. So the governors of Judah are going to be like a fire pan in a wood pile, like a fiery torch. They're devouring people. Of course, they were going to turn to Jerusalem, but yet they would end up devouring others. They're not going to be able to save, but they were destroying others themselves. And I think that really does apply well to false teachers, that they can't turn to like their leaders for hope, but they in turn are destroying people themselves. And that's what the governors of Judah are doing. The Lord also shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. So the Lord is going to save a remnant of people, the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And I think we can get into some figurative language here of Jerusalem representing the church. Did that go off? Yeah. I don't know why. Give me just a moment. This did not. We had the TV go off here, is what I'm doing. All right, I'm not sure what happened there. I tell you what might have happened, I didn't think of this. It's been on since a little before 9 o'clock, probably about 4 hours. There's probably a timer that I have it to cut off after 4 hours. I have the TV at home. If I forget to turn it off, it turns off after 4 hours. So that's probably what happened here. The Lord also shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. So he's talking about saving the tents of Judah. Tents often represent those who are like roaming or a small group. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Now, I think he has been talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. But I think it sort of switches over here could have meaning for the end of time as well. The Lord shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. We're considered part of Jerusalem by being in the church. And he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them. Those who are in the Lord, whenever destruction comes, whether it was the destruction of Jerusalem or the end of time, will be like the house of David. That's the lineage of Jesus that will live forever. They will not suffer whatever comes upon them. And there's probably a lot of things here we obviously are missing, but I think we get the general overview. Like the angel of the Lord before them. And of course we're told we're equal to the angels, so we'll be able to stand like the angel of the Lord before them. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. I couldn't help but, as I read this earlier, think about, seems like I go to Revelation so much, but Revelation 20, that at the very end, it talks about, says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison just an indefinite time, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, that references a battle in Ezekiel, to gather them together to battle, to whom the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. Now, this here in Revelation, I don't think has happened yet, this part. But says, I will come, back in Zechariah, and it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. So at the end, it says, they compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And then the last time the devil's ever mentioned in the Bible is the next verse. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And then the judgment unfolds. These are frightening things here, but yet comforting things, because the world cannot harm us. Just 5 more verses here. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, obviously referring to Jesus. And they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. So I think here he's talking about pouring upon the house of David, of Jesus being offered. I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplications, which are prayers, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. It's interesting that it's no doubt referring to Jesus here, but he speaks in first person as though he is writing this. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him, and they did mourn for Jesus, as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadadrimmon in the valley of Megadon. I want to look these up here. So I think we've talked about the destruction of Jerusalem, but then he goes back a little bit, talks about the great mourning that will come in Jerusalem because of Jesus being crucified. This Hamadan, Hadad of the pomegranates is what it means. A place in the valley of Megiddo where a national lamentation was held for the death of King Josiah, named after 2 Syrian gods. So the mourning, it was probably the greatest mourning maybe had been among them. And he says it's going to be a mourning like this in the valley of, and you see where it's at. Located 11 miles from Nazareth where Jesus grew up. So there's going to be a great mourning in Jerusalem, and the people were sad over Jesus. You remember even the 2 men walking back to Emmaus, Caiaphas and the other one's unnamed. They were in mourning over the things that happened. They said, this is the 3rd day. And they didn't, they were confused. There was great mourning. He said, it's going to be mourning in that day like this mourning of Hadadrimmon back to another king. And the land shall mourn, every family apart. The family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart. The family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart. Just as there's going to be mourning in great families, great mourning in the families. The house of David, their wives, just wherever you're at, there's going to be mourning. I do think about the 2 that were walking on the road to Emmaus. They were going back to their house with sadness. The family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart. The family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart. Just everybody's going to be mourning, not like just in a whole gathering, like say at a funeral, but everybody at home. Everybody's just going to be mourning over Jesus now and the things that have happened. All the families that remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. And then next week, we'll pick up, and that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David. And so I think we're talking about Jesus here. This morning we sung as our invitation song, there's a fountain free. There's going to be a fountain open to the house of David. So I think two things are covered in Zechariah 12. One, no doubt the destruction of Jerusalem, probably representing the end of time, but the destruction of Jerusalem. Then he talks about Jesus being crucified there, because he plainly says, they will look upon me whom they have pierced. And there was great sadness because of what they did to Jesus. But then there's going to be great joy, a fountain will be open. And that will fit. No, we got 2 more chapters of Zechariah. Well, we'll stop there, and in a moment we'll sing a closing and invitation song together. I know this can be almost a little overwhelming, a lot of this, if you've never looked or studied at Zechariah, but I think we can get the general meanings. He just is warning that great destruction is coming, to be prepared. There's going to be mourning over that. There's going to be mourning over Jesus, but yet we can be saved. I'd marked number 903 as the invitation song. There's power in the blood. They pierced Jesus, and his blood poured out. They drove a spear into his side, and water and blood came forth. That's why, like water and in baptism, we contact the blood of Christ. Before I sing this song, does anyone here need the Lord's Supper? No one? Okay. But we'll sing this in a moment as a closing and invitation song. I know everyone here has obeyed the Lord of adults, but we always want to make sure we live faithfully, because, as we talked about in our class part, there's a far worse shaking than they saw the mountain. Heaven and earth is shaking at the end. But don't forget our service online tonight at 6 o'clock on YouTube, and Wednesday night. And I hadn't received anyone. Remember our sick, of course, Alice. And Sandy's going to have her hip replaced. I almost said knee, but you've already done that, hadn't you? Twice, hadn't you? How many replacements are you allowed in one lifetime? And so she's going to be having that coming up soon. Continue to remember Alice. And we're very thankful. Of course, Elaine announced that her husband, Jerry Reynolds, went to the doctor and there was no sign of cancer. And so it was gone. And so he goes back in 3 months. And so that's very good news. It's the kind of news you like to hear. Remember Rick Gibbs as well, and Lauren, and I'm trying to think of any others. Of course, a lot traveling for the holidays. All right, let's sing number 903. And after this song, we'll ask Chris to dismiss us. Let us stand. Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would your evil a victory win? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb.
Very good. Lord, thanks for allowing us to gather here today and worship you and study your word, Lord. Please allow us to take the things that we do study from the Bible that you've left for us, Lord. Help us to apply that to our lives, Lord, and help us to understand it, Lord, so we may be better Christians, have better lives, Lord, better serve you, understand your intentions for us, God. Please, God, be with us each and every step of the way throughout this life. We know that there are many temptations and many different avenues of sin, Lord, that we can be led down. Please help us to guard ourselves against that, God. Guard our minds, our hearts, our souls against Satan and any temptations he may throw our way, Lord. Please, God, be with the church who are sick, or those who are away, or those who might have surgery soon. Please help them to be better, get back to us, God. Lord, please be with us all and help us to get home safely and come again next Sunday. In Jesus' name, I always pray. Amen.